Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Danny Santos with the Astro Daddy Podcast. We are back with a new guest. We've got Shaun Ryan. Am I saying it correctly?
Shaun Ryan.
Shaun Ryan. I don't know why I thought it was Shaun Ryan. For some reason, I thought when we met you had said, yeah, maybe I misheard you. But hi, Shaun. How's it going?
Going well.
Oh my
it's good
God.
to be here.
It's a pleasure.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you too, man. So I mentioned to you before we started recording that last week we had Amir Awadi on, and I met Amir and you both at the Awakening of Consciousness conference.
Yeah.
So absolutely incredible experience. But why don't you just introduce yourself? Let my listeners know a little bit about you. Do you believe in astrology? I mean,
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't really pay any attention to it as a kid.
yeah.
I was very logical, left-brained and linear. And then more and more as I've come to see full moons would always affect certain relationships more intensely, or things like that would shift.
Yeah.
And then now that I do sacred ceremony and just govern my life much more balanced, not just purely logical, but also with the creative, I see how those really not just the moon phases, but it seems like all the astral bodies really affect everything that we do.
Absolutely.
So on some level, they intensify or de-intensify or put hurdles up. So yeah, it's fascinating to me.
Well, a major part of the work that I do with astrology always comes into my ceremonies. I know you know that I work with plant medicine such as ayahuasca, and the stars and the astrology signs on the planets always drop in. They make appearances in my ceremonies, and they kind of work with me as almost like sacred teachers.
Right.
So I was like, hey, why not educate the masses about what these archetypes mean and how they show up in someone's life?
Yeah.
So do you know what your sun, moon, and rising sign are?
My sign, I'm Taurus.
That's right.
Rising Scorpio, and moon is Leo, correct?
Yes.
Which is my mom. So.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Well, and the moon represents the mother in the birth chart.
Funny.
So the mother being Leo. That's interesting. But what's worth noting about all three of these is that they're all what is known as fixed signs of the zodiac. So have you heard this term before?
I have probably, but I don't know what it means.
Okay.
I thought they were all somewhat fixed.
Well, in astrology, there's what is known as modes. So we've got the elements. There's 4 elements. So there's 3 modes. 4 times 3, 12 signs of the zodiac. So the first mode is known as cardinal. The second one is known as mutable. The second one is fixed. Third one is mutable. A fixed sign of the zodiac is it's set. The way that it goes about things, it's consistent. The reason it's a fixed sign is because those who are born in the center of a season is what the season is really consistent. You were born April 27th. That's a time of year where it's spring, but it's the fixed part of spring. Right. You're dead in the middle of spring. So you're fixed earth sign, Taurus. What do you know about Taurus?
That makes sense. Yes, I've heard that. Instead of the word fixed, I've heard stubborn.
Okay, sure. That's what
I like fixed.
Everybody knows Taurus are stubborn, but that's such a cheap version of the sign.
Yeah. And I imagine maybe if you stay very static as to your personal growth, sure, you can get rooted in the stubbornness.
Yeah.
But that's been my goal, is to work through that challenge. So
sure.
I consider myself a lot more fluid now with things and much more in the flow of life rather than trying to force the flow or push the flow.
Yeah. And, Taurus is one of my favorite signs. And my birth chart, my personal life placement is Taurus. So being around people that are, kind of stable, comfortable, enjoying pleasure and sensuality and beauty. Taurus is all about it wants security. So, you're laughing. So tell me, why are you laughing? What does that bring up for you?
Yeah, that's always been in my head. How do I get to a place where I don't have to think about that or be concerned at all in any way about, money or, home space. The home space is, of course, very important. So that's one thing, but that's always been taken care of. But it's more just having all the essentials easily taken care of so that I can just go and live life.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So while we're on this topic of the fixed signs, I'm kind of developing this personal theory of mine. I mentioned the modes of cardinal, fixed, mutable. It's my theory that the fixed signs are all some variation of the ego. So the sign Taurus is the first fixed sign of the zodiac. It's only the second sign, first fixed sign. And my theory is Taurus is the sign of comforting the ego, finding comfort, pleasure. Taurus is ruled by Venus.
All right.
So it's all about sensuality, beauty, good music, good food, good sex. Taurus is like pleasure.
For sure.
Can you speak a little bit about this idea of pleasure, beauty, just, I don't know, what this inspires in you?
Yeah, that's probably part of the reason I've always been drawn to art, like to creating art. You know, I have some talents as far as drawing, painting, stuff like that. Not that I've nurtured it much in recent years, but I've always been drawn to, funny enough, the more expensive things.
Yeah.
I'll go to a store and be like, oh, I love this. And it's the most expensive thing they've got.
Well, you have an eye for beauty.
Yeah, it's true.
You know?
True. And of course, that's been another hurdle in dating because that can bring certain challenges.
Sure.
Just going like, oh, the most prettiest person versus let me see how their energy is. Let me see what their spirit is. You know, all those different variations.
Yeah.
And initially in my dating life, it was just like, oh, I want that just because it's pretty.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been a hard lesson, but I think I've got it.
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about where that comes from because you have planets that reveal when it comes to sex, love, and relationships, like impulsive, wanting to jump in 200%.
There's definitely the impulsive thing for sure. Like,
I have that in my birth chart too.
but it's like talking about the astrology. It's like, oh, I'll see a thing, a sign, something, a post, whatever it is, and I'll take that as, oh, okay, this is a yes, move forward.
Yeah.
Right?
Whereas like sometimes we have to flush these things out a little bit more, and like being a Taurus with these, I'll just say it, I guess, you've got Venus and Mars and Aries.
Yeah.
So Aries is the first sign. It's a cardinal sign, which means it's the beginning of the season, the full upswing of the season, and it's a fire sign. So full upswing fire. Well, Venus and Mars are sex, sexuality, pleasure, how we go after what we want. You go. When you like something, there's an impulse.
Yeah.
Would you say this is true?
Very, very true.
You know, but not just in relationships, it's in life in general.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like that kind of reflects you? How are you a go-getter?
Well, I'm never comfortable just being in a place of comfort.
Yeah.
That's it. So just being like settled, it always seems like there is something to grow through or to progress through, to evolve, right? I've always just taken it that's kind of my place to jump into my fears. That's part of why I do, plant medicine work as well.
Yeah.
So that I can face those fears and grow through them to be a better version of myself, more authentically connected to me and to others, and to be able to trust these signs and signposts.
Yeah, yeah. So those Venus and Mars placements, that impulsiveness of Aries, you have experience from personal experience, like, maybe failing forward in your own way.
Yeah.
And then like you have to learn when it comes to relationships and sex and these kinds of things, what not to do by just jumping in.
And by creating a contrast that way.
Yeah.
I think that's what I really did is in my 20s, I just like jumped in as hard as I could and just got smacked around a bunch really hard until it was like, it was painfully clear, okay, this is what I don't want.
Yeah.
So let me pay more attention to the subtleties and details of what's going on.
Well, I have Venus and Aries in my birth chart too. And I've been the guy who's like 200% into a relationship. I'm going to love this person even if they don't love me back and try to win them over.
That's how it used to be.
Yeah. So I'm curbing that at this point in my life now. So you've got some experience with these signs, but also you can work with people who are impulsive yourself.
Yeah.
You kind of understand them.
Totally.
And then the Taurus side of you is like, well, I'm grounded. I want my stability. I want to be a little bit more assured.
Yeah.
So you've got this kind of contrasting part of yourself in both of these signs,
And I feel that.
Yeah. Well, what does it feel like for you?
It's like a balance. So it can be challenging in certain ways because something will come up or somebody's perspective or an option, a situation, and I'll see both sides equivocally.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of challenging because then it's, well, okay, they're both perfectly balanced in my head. Not that they necessarily are, but I can see both sides evenly.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, these two sides of yourself. So we know that this Taurus energy comforting the ego plays a major role in your birth chart. We've also got this asteroid known as Chiron in Taurus. So Chiron represents our most profound pain which leads to our deepest healing.
Mm.
And in astrology, the sun sign represents the ego. So the sun sign can also be a metaphor for the father. But what this means, I'll give you the full smorgasbord of definitions, and you can kind of tell me what lands and what doesn't.
Okay.
So if your greatest pain is the sun, well, this can be a low self-esteem, especially earlier on in life, kind of a bit of an identity crisis or finding yourself. And it can also possibly translate to issues with the father, especially earlier on in life.
So far, yes, all of that.
Okay. So talk to me. What if you're comfortable?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I had a father figure. I call him my Italian dad.
Okay.
And he was there since I was, before I was 1. So he was there. And so my sense of family was 100% Italian. He was 100% his mom and dad. So that was my sense of family.
Is this your bio dad?
No.
Okay.
So my biological dad, then I met when I was 15. So
no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the father wound.
Yeah,
there it
for
is.
sure. So there's the father wound.
In
and
the
then,
birth chart.
Yeah. And then
Did you know that the Italian man wasn't your father?
Yeah, I did. In a kid way. I didn't see it as like that very clear specific thing, but yes.
Yeah, you had some kind of unconscious knowing maybe?
Yeah.
Or
for sure.
interesting.
Yeah, the resonance was different.
Yeah. So how do you think how did that affect your self-esteem growing up, and then what was it like to actually meet your bio dad?
Well, I would say, like, relating to Chiron, the childhood wound, I know specifically, especially from doing all the plant medicine work.
Sure.
Mine was when I was 6 years old. So it directly related to the lack of having a father.
Yeah.
And so being betrayed in that way from like a father figure in certain ways, that just, it pushed me to totally wall off and close the world off and just become much more of an introvert, because before that I was this happy-go-lucky wild kid, just wanting to explore and see everything and taste and touch and the whole sensual side of life,
pleasure.
right? All of that, to live life to the fullest. So interestingly, since then I was so shy and naive and gullible and introverted, and that was part of the security, was my left brain, right? This is logical, this makes sense. So what I was feeling, that all got kind of relegated until I really started working on myself on deep levels after my Saturn returns in my early 30s.
Yeah.
So like late 20s, that's what I moved all the way from Florida. That's where I'm from, to California, and I'd never been over here. So that's what pushed that. My Saturn returns was big.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, looking at your birth chart, Saturn is in Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun. So this means the first, 27 to 30 years of your life, the universe is putting you in this situation where you have to train really hard to work with that ego. You're training, you're pushing, you're training. And then when Saturn returns, it's like, okay, we're going to give you the lesson you've been training for so long. Yeah. Saturn restricts something. Well, Saturn in Leo. Leo's ruled by the sun. The sun is the ego. Saturn restricting the ego, the relationship with the father. So it's around that time that you really come into this phase of fully embracing yourself, your manhood, your everything. Yeah. Does that make sense to you?
Totally, yeah.
So what did that specific journey look like? I mean, around that Saturn return?
It was all ego, because interestingly, before I moved out here, I was really inflating my ego.
Yeah.
I got to a place of just arrogance, and from no real place, just from a very shallow place. So then when I came out here, I still kept most of that energy, and then was like, okay, this is how I live. This is how I was used to living, a certain way, a certain lifestyle, a certain car, whatever all that was. And then LA had a lot to teach me in that way of,
LA will teach you.
Like, no, this is not a gimme. You're going to have to actually work. Your beautiful, simple idea of coming out here and paying the bills this way. No. I had done some modeling, and I was like, oh, I'll just do that. Cool. This is like the home of models, right?
Yeah. This
no,
is where
not
they
at
live.
all. Apparently I was way too old. You need to be like 18 to 21 max.
Oh, okay.
As a male model.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was part of the rude awakening, and just so many other things.
Okay. So the universe is like, get your ego straight.
Quick humbling of the ego. And then that just has continued for years and years. And I think, that's my goal, is to keep that awareness and not fall back into that.
Yeah. Well, meeting you at the conference, that's the only other time that we've spoken. And then talking to you today, I feel incredible humility from you.
Oh, thanks.
So you've got all of these ego signs showing up very strongly in your birth chart, but they do different things. So we know that the sun in Taurus is comforting the ego, but we've got your Scorpio rising. So we know Scorpio is the sign of death.
Oh, funny. Because, I jump into that.
Yeah. Well, Scorpio's
ego death. Sure. Let
ego
me jump
death.
into that.
There you go. But also when you show up on a first impression, there's something a little striking about it. Scorpio rising from the energy. It's not even, it's part of your aura. It's part of the unconscious energy that you put off based on you. So like a Scorpio rising person, first of all, Scorpio being one of our fixed signs, how does that play into ego? Well, if, opposite sign Taurus is comforting the ego, Scorpio is the ego death. So you've experienced a significant amount of ego death in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's my personal opinion that ayahuasca is a Scorpio. Because the name ayahuasca literally translates to the vine of death.
Yeah.
So you come in with Scorpio rising. When you show up, people feel the ego death energy. Now let's talk about what that means. They're either super attracted to you, magnetized to you, polarized by you. Your presence might insult them, or your presence
That's funny.
It's polarizing. It's intense. When you show up, it's not a light reaction.
Oh, that makes sense, because I've always wondered why it seemed to be certain people just totally avoid even looking at me.
Yeah. It's that first impression.
Strange.
Well, you're born under the sign Scorpio.
So
it was literally on the horizon. That's why it's called a rising sign, because Scorpio was rising on the horizon when you were born. So you're born under this.
Okay.
It's just as much of your personality as being the sun sign in Taurus. Now, the difference is the ego wants to comfort the ego, but your presence is killing it off. So you have to get comfortable being like, well, not everyone's going to like me or love me. Right. And some people might like me or love me too much.
Right.
Extremes.
Yeah.
So anything you want to say about this?
Well, yeah, I've definitely experienced the liking or loving too much.
Yeah.
And the not liking too much. More in high school,
Sure.
Kids wanting to fight and stuff like that.
Of
bullies,
course.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But as an adult, really just, the relationship thing, or people coming after me for a relationship that I had no interest in at all.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, even some strange friendships around that.
Mm-hmm.
And wondering, where are you coming from? How are you getting this? It's
Right.
not from me, is it?
Well, it's not really you. It's the energy you just give off.
Right.
The rising sign is what I like to call the superego. If you're familiar with Freud, he has the theory of the ego, the id, the superego. So the sun sign is what constructs people's ego. The moon sign is the id, or the unconscious response to life. And then the rising sign is the way that we unconsciously punish ourselves and say, you have to be this certain thing. So you unconsciously put a lot of pressure on you.
Yeah.
And people feel that energy, and they're either sexually attracted to it, or they're magnetized to it, or repelled by it. So you attract a lot of intensity your way. Scorpio rising. You walk in the room, everybody goes, what's going on? Do you feel that?
Yeah.
So when I look at your chart, your rising sign is 22 degrees Scorpio. So 22, master placement. So working with plant medicine and being maybe a grim reaper, or like a gatekeeper of ego death.
I love to do that.
It's part of your work.
Yeah.
So here's the really cool thing about your chart and my chart. My career sign is 21 degrees Scorpio.
Oh.
Your rising sign is 22. So we have what's known as a conjunction. So we can work together.
Yeah.
And then my personal life placement's Taurus. That's your sign. So we have kind of compatible things. And I mentioned maybe studying some mentorship through you, or, wanting to learn from you. Because I didn't know you were Scorpio rising, but my unconscious was like, that's my career sign. Like, I want to work with you. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So another thing is being Scorpio rising. When people come to you, they unconsciously might be looking for their own ego death.
I think so.
So say more about that.
Well, yeah, especially with like plant medicines, like even simple medicine like hape, you know, shamanic snuff for those that don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I like to tiptoe with people. Some people will serve massive doses no matter what when you go to them. But and ultimately it depends. I trust like how the medicine flows, you know, pouring it out and all that and serving it. But I love to serve those medicines where it's just really humbling.
Yeah.
Right. And I have had some friends who are like, give me the strongest one you've got and I'll take it. And, you know, big, strong guys. And then they're just purging their guts out and they're just like, oh.
Well, ego is a medicine in and of itself.
Totally.
You know, when I was first sitting with my teacher over time, I kept like thinking to myself like, oh, she doesn't want to give me the full glass. Like, what's up with that? She's holding me back, you know? So that's my big ego, which I've had to put under control and learn what that's about.
Yeah. And that's part of ties into where I'm at with it too, is to not just smashing the ego, because then it can push people the other way afterwards and integration wise.
If the ego death is too strict or too much, that's why it's important to have an experienced shaman, practitioner, medicine man, whatever, who knows how to properly dose and who's done those dietas or those rituals or whatever themselves to know like, oh, I'm not about to fuck this person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So can you say more about being a gatekeeper for the ego death or being, you know, maybe someone in this position?
Yeah. I mean, that's my passion really, is to help people work through those egos. Cause I saw, you know, personally how I was so inhibited by mine and so imprisoned in this tiny little cage that I created by myself.
Yeah.
You know, ultimately through the life I had lived through and all that, but then how that was my comfort zone. So much more expansive ever since I decided to jump out of it.
Yeah.
And then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, this fear of, how cool I can be in all of this space with all of these people and truly connected. So
and just be yourself.
Yeah. And so holding that container for people for me is really such an honor. And it's funny because generally they receive it the same way. So it's just this kind of beautiful cycle of, you know, like love.
Yeah. Well, in my birth chart, I have that Chiron asteroid, the one of the greatest pain and the greatest healing, in the sign of Leo. Leo is ruled by the sun, so it's the ego. So I have the same wound, you know? It's just coming through. Yours is because you have the sun sign in Taurus, the ego sign in Taurus. Mine's because I have the asteroid of the wounding in the ego sign of Leo. Wow. So where your Saturn is. So we're playing with the same planetary things.
Right.
You know, it's just, all right, how do you comfort a wounded ego? Yeah. And if I were to ask you, what would you say? How do you comfort the wounded ego?
From working on it, from learning these rituals and ceremonies that give me that comfort and help me realize that I'm in that place of ego, because the ego can be very stuck and static. Generally, it's doing its job to help us stay safe, right? But
and it wants more and more and more.
Exactly.
But the other side of this coin is that ego is not a bad thing.
Totally.
I think people want to think that it's like, oh, I have to kill my ego off.
Yeah, that's not healthy, because our ego is doing its job. It helps us differentiate ourselves from others and from things, right?
Yeah.
If we didn't have an ego, then it all would be one, essentially.
That's a good point.
There's no discernment.
Say more about that.
Well, so I have a guru. He's a Himalayan monk. And that's like a big thing that he teaches is our ego is serving. It's self-serving. And this is part of the thing of living in balance with it. Yeah. Not in service to it, but allowing it, getting to the place where it's in service to us ultimately, right? So that we're aware of it. Because if we're not, then it's totally controlling our life in so many ways that we're not even aware of.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I like to tell people that astrology is really just the study of becoming a shapeshifter. So hear me out.
I've been called that.
Ooh. Well, let's see. Shapeshifting signs in your birth chart, you do have Neptune in Sagittarius. So especially when it comes to spirituality, you're going to have a strong shapeshifter muscle. Yeah. You can kind of become different religion or different mindsets, different spiritual beings. Yeah. So we'll touch more upon that. But I believe that astrology is the form, the education of shapeshifting, because it teaches the 12 archetypes. Mm-hmm. Then it has, 8 or 9, 10 planetary bodies that move through those archetypes. And then 12 astrological houses. So if you learn like, oh, Scorpio rising with a sun in Taurus and a moon in Leo in your birth chart, you can shift into those signs naturally because you're born under them. But if you want to become the most well-rounded person, check the birth chart, see like, oh, what do I need to shape into the most or shift into the most?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to help educate or further my own energy forward?
Right.
So if I were to ask you, what is it that you're looking for out of this lifetime? Because then I'll compare it to what your birth chart says you're supposed to move towards.
I think this is really it, because I have done personal training for some time, and it's really letting that go.
Like fitness
by the end
training.
of the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, you're just doing a different kind of personal training now.
Right. And to me, that was serving my heart at the time. And, it's still a great service, I think, to offer. It just doesn't speak to my heart. I enjoy it, but I don't love it. So at this point, it's really just living from that place of love, and including the service that I do, making it a whole rounded career, essentially, so that it's also how I take care of myself financially, trusting in that flow of abundance and being of service. So that's what I'm shifting towards by year's end, is just doing ceremonial work, wellness coaching. I've been studying beyond being a personal trainer. I've been studying wellness, immunity, all this stuff for a couple of decades. So
right on.
So I have a full grasp of, overall holistic wellness.
Yeah.
And then including the plant medicines and doing ceremonies and rituals with those to help work through specific challenges for our egos, right?
Yeah.
To grow through them.
Absolutely.
And to become more aware and attuned.
Yeah. It sounds like you have a good grasp on the tools you need in order to get what you're trying to do.
Yeah. I feel like I do at this point.
Yeah. Because you've got the plants, you've got you mentioned like different things for the immunity or the body, like knowing those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. That's important education.
Yeah.
A lot of the food here in the United States is pretty demonic, in my opinion.
Yes.
So
there's a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah.
A lot of booby traps.
Oh yeah. Like I've been in the process of healing a really serious eating disorder I've had my entire life.
Wow. That's tough.
Yeah. But also, after one of my most recent dietas, I was like shown like, oh, the food in this country, in the US, there's so many things that are illegal in other countries that are fine here.
Yeah.
So we need people like you to come in and to teach and to educate and
show that light.
Yeah. And that's something I'm always looking to learn more about as well.
Yeah. And it's a lot. I mean, I still research, I don't know how many hours a week, but I would guesstimate at least 15, 16, 18 hours a week minimal. And so there's so much to know. And even through trial and error and just corroborating things, like, a lot of people don't look at sources and citations, especially with Google. They'll just go on, find the first result and be like, oh, this is the case. This is true. I should never eat this. I should always eat this. And those hard rules, first off, don't generally work at all.
Yeah.
And then does the site or the resource actually have sources and citations from other places, not just that person who may be thinking it?
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense, So when I look at your birth chart, we have what's known as the North Node and the South Node. So the North Node is what would represent your destiny in this lifetime, what you're looking to learn more from, what you're looking to develop further in yourself. The South Node is what you've already developed. It's comfortable. It's where your skills, gifts, and talents will be found naturally. But it's also like where there's not too much room to grow.
Right.
Like you've already mastered these signs as far as you really can.
Yeah.
So in your birth chart, your South Node signs, your past lives, are, Aries and Virgo. So Aries and Virgo. Do you want to say anything on those, or do you want me to unpack it?
Aries is kind of like the child of the zodiac, right? Like Marlon Brando, I know he's in Aries. So
I love Marlon Brando.
He's incredible. Like the best actor still in the world.
I agree.
Incredibly talented. But yes, he definitely had that child, like living his life, just getting away with things because he could.
Yeah.
All the way through his whole, totally.
Animalistic, warrior-like. It's a very masculine sign.
Yeah.
Aries is also like jump first, look later. Impulsivity.
Yeah.
So you've got your Venus and Mars in Aries. So we talked about that kind of behavior of like, in relationships and sex and like just wanting to run into things 200%.
Yeah.
Well, some people could actually afford to learn how to become more impulsive.
Yeah.
But for you, you've gotten your fill.
Yeah.
Like your soul can't really develop anymore by being that way.
Right.
You can shapeshift into that when needed.
Yeah.
You know, I believe you're in a relationship now.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you ever want to like, hey, go for it 200% with your partner, you have that developed.
Right.
But let's say you're in a relationship and then you break the rules. Aries is one of the signs that likes to break the rules. So earlier on in life, like, hey, maybe breaking the rules here and there. And, you know, you can't break the rules anymore in this lifetime and make your progress.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Totally. Yeah.
So that's one of the first past life signs in your birth chart. The other one being Virgo, the sign of perfection, needing to be perfect in details, organization.
Balance too, yeah?
Virgos, I would give balance to Libra.
Oh, Libra's balance.
You know,
Gotcha.
Virgo is more about control.
There's definitely a perfection thing. Which
Yeah.
I feel like I've worked through some of that at least, and just letting it not be perfect, but better than it was, which has been challenging in certain ways.
Yeah. Well, having like that critical nature is Virgo, or like being able to work with the human body is Virgo. So like you've got this incredible gift of like being a trainer. Well, and also Aries is the sign of the athlete. So we've got Virgo, which is about nutrition, the human body, these kinds of things, how to organize and clean things up. And then Aries about the athleticism and all of that. So you even said it, you've kind of mastered being a trainer. You can't do that anymore in this lifetime.
Right.
And find your purpose. You've already been that.
Yeah.
So your destiny in this lifetime, we've got the signs Libra and Pisces. So what do you know about Libra? Let's start there.
That's the balance. The
Yes,
scales.
that is
Got
the
it,
scales,
yes.
the balance.
Well, it's funny. I got a tattoo with the yin
Whoa.
yang. So
Very
balance has
fitting.
been important for me since I really began working on myself in my 30s. I think that was the first thing I really realized, is that I was just really much more in my masculine. And then later I had a coach that said, yeah, you need to start doing some more yin things to nurture your feminine, your creative, all that.
Well, you've developed Aries. It's the masculine sign. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Being any more masculine isn't going to cause you to grow.
Right. So yeah, it's important, you know, even from a personal training perspective, you want to be balanced, right? Your body. You definitely don't want
if you
one side
exercise
bigger.
one side, you're going to have like a giant muscle here. And
For sure.
you know.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just always made sense to me to parlay that into the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's this energy of balance, but Libra's not just balance. It's knowing how to follow the rules.
Huh.
You know, knowing what the rules are, first of all.
There's definitely a rebel without a cause.
Yeah. Well, that's Aries. So your soul's on this whole mission of like, okay, I'm going to run 200% and not care if I'm breaking a window and like hitting someone's car here. And then like I broke my own leg, but like whatever, I'll shrug it off. You know, it's like you're here to learn the rules.
Yeah.
And Aries is also the sign of like, I'm relating to myself. So when someone has it flipped and their north node is Aries and south node Libra, they actually need to stop being codependent on other people and find themselves. You already know who you are. You've already done things on your own.
At this point, yeah.
Yeah. Your destiny is to learn to relate with other people and not just relate, but also guide them, teach them, work with them.
Interesting. Because that helps me. The work I'm doing, that's totally it.
Well, that's why you're attracted to it.
Really relating. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the other sign that you've got in your birth chart, because the north node is in the 12th house. So that's the area of life that's synonymous with Pisces. So do you know anything about this sign?
My dad's Pisces. Wait, he's February 5th. Pisces, right?
Aquarius.
Oh, he's Aquarius.
And we'll talk about that because Aquarius is in your chart as well, but we'll come around to that.
Okay.
What do you know about Pisces?
I'm told that, it's a water sign, but that's generally a lot of emotion, right?
Yeah.
That's really all I know.
All right. Well, you're talking to the guy if you want to know about this sign. So my sun, moon, and Mercury are all in Pisces.
Wow.
And I've got like a loaded 12th house in my birth chart. I've got Neptune and Uranus there. So that's the Pisces area of life.
So you're great with plant medicine.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. I live for it, And Pisces is one of the plant medicine signs. Pisces does well there. Scorpio does really well there. So your Scorpio rising, north node in the 12th house, you're definitely on a shamanic path.
Yeah.
but because Pisces is the sign of shamanism. It's the final sign of the zodiac. Sagittarius and Scorpio kind of have shamanism qualities as well. All of the signs, I guess, do. But for you specifically, Pisces, you're here to develop compassion, kindness, forgiveness, surrender, having complete faith that everything's going to work out. Yeah. You know, like you're a sense of removing the criticism of Virgo, realizing not everything's going to be perfect. And maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's going to turn out the way it's meant to.
Yeah, I do believe that.
Yeah. So, but the shamanic path, really, that's what the 12th house can at its highest vibration bring. Because then it's not just about becoming spiritual and compassionate, but it's like teaching other people, working with other people, doing things in more private settings, like a church, or working with people who are imprisoned, or these kinds of locations. You know, it's the energy of going into the shadow, to then help other people face their own darkness.
Great.
So it's kind of that's like Scorpio and Pisces a little bit, but yeah. So can you talk to me a little bit about this energy?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm drawn to just do alone. I mean, the wellness coaching, of course, is important to me. That's integral because that's part of your integration. You know, say we do a sacred ceremony together and it's really deep work. Then part of the integration of that is the things that you need to shift, or that you're open to shifting, to embrace those lessons, right? To embrace the new vibration that you're vibrating at, which generally is a higher vibration.
Yeah.
So all those wellness things that I've learned are perfect fit for that. So how not to fall into, you know, poor nutrition, because that doesn't cater to your higher vibration, right? And you're living the fullest life that you can, being as fully functional and feeling as good as you can.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've got the Aries, so you know how to coach and be that warrior, and then the Virgo, you know how to organize and set something straight. Yeah. So you can use those talents, and then like following the rules, developing relationships with other people to then bring, well, Pisces is ultimately the healing archetype. So to heal yourself, but it's in Libra, so also healing other people. So, and you've got this concept of the wounded healer. Have you heard of this before?
Sure, yeah.
So, you know, you've got all of the things we look for someone who's going to be a great healer.
Right.
So that's your path this time around. And it sounds like you're living it. You're working with a guru, you're doing ceremony. Yeah. You know?
For sure.
So can you speak a little bit more about this? How did you get into this kind of work?
From being a wounded healer
okay.
and not realizing it.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of the medicine work for me, is that I had some blacked out traumas that I clearly had no clue happened.
Yeah.
Until
when you say blacked out trauma, just for the listeners, I know what that means, but can you explain?
Some really dark stuff that happened in childhood that was so dark to my consciousness at that point that my childhood mind just blacked it out completely, so that I never even had a clue any of it happened. And it was a process. It was like a 7-month ordeal. Yeah. So there was chunks of that, little bits, fragments I would remember of, you know, normal life, you know, kind of playing and stuff like that, a little bit. But for the most part, it was blacked out until I did a ceremony, and this was in my late 30s.
Wow.
And then that showed me some incredible truths that just, it's interesting. It's like trying to look through glasses that have a big like smudge, like right in the middle of the lenses, right?
Interesting.
And then you don't realize it's there. You're frustrated on a certain
gap.
Yeah, you're frustrated on a certain level because you don't understand why things look so funky and why things keep happening certain ways. And then once that trauma effervesced, and it was just super clear, because I'd had a dream the night before the ceremony. Yeah. And then in the ceremony, it was like, oh my gosh, wow. But I got to see the beauty of it, of what was happening was I was being used as a healer. So interestingly, I didn't see that I was a healer at that point, but the other person did. And in their own depraved way, they were seeking healing. So since I was a boy, I've had that like wounded healer, and then clearly that was a wound for me. Yeah, that just now serves me, and has led me to all these deep levels of compassion and forgiveness, and just, it's interesting. It's like trying to look through glasses that have a big like smudge, like right in the middle of the lenses, and you don't realize it's there. You're frustrated on a certain level because you don't understand why things look so funky and why things keep happening certain ways. And then once that trauma effervesced, and it was just super clear, because I'd had a dream the night before the ceremony. Yeah. And then that showed me some incredible truths that just, it's interesting. It's like trying to look through glasses that have a big like smudge, like right in the middle of the lenses, and you don't realize it's there. You're frustrated on a certain level because you don't understand why things look so funky and why things keep happening certain ways. And then once that trauma effervesced, and it was just super clear, because I'd had a dream the night before the ceremony. Yeah. And then that showed me some incredible truths that just, it's interesting. It's like trying to look through glasses that have a big like smudge, like right in the middle of the lenses, and you don't realize being of service and realizing how, especially for men, like it's interesting because recently, especially, I've heard all these numbers thrown around and people talking about how so many men are traumatized sexually when they're kids and have, some of us have no clue until we work on ourselves, if we ever do. And then some of us may have a clue, but just don't ever want to go there because it's so daunting.
Yeah,
it's part of our identity, what we've become, right?
Well, and like facing parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at.
Yeah.
And like how traumatic that can be.
Yeah.
So
I do get I don't really get the fear of, at this point. Even then, I've always been like, well, no, I'm going to take this on. So there is a fear around that of what am I going to be if I do explore this? So that's where I can hold space for that. I don't fully understand that because to me, it's such a limitation.
Sure. If someone doesn't explore their shadow.
Right. But I can hold space for that because I do believe in the divine timing of it all.
Yeah.
And some people aren't ready to do certain things or explore certain things.
Yeah. Well, and someone might come to you as their facilitator and you get them to a certain point and they're like, okay, peace, thank you. And then they go to somebody else who they get the breakthrough.
Totally.
Or they come back and then years later they come back again.
Yeah. And all of that's happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even like they come to you once, don't see anybody else and come back later.
Yeah.
You know? So it's.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, I served a man this year. He was 50 and he had a stroke.
Whoa. Not in ceremony.
No, not in ceremony. He
might have felt like it, but.
Well, interestingly, when I served him medicine, he jumped totally into that energy and was releasing the energy in his body of the stroke, like shaking it out and processing it in certain ways.
I understand that.
So it was really beautiful to see. And he purged in so many ways, like cleansing. Yeah. And then afterwards, he moved differently. He had much more control of his body. And the point is, like, he ultimately ended up integrating like plant medicine into his life. And then that was December that I had served him. So it was not even a year ago.
Wow.
But he's since passed away.
Oh. Okay.
So, to me, that's really incredible because it was just like he was ready. And the medicine I served him was the most strongest medicine I'm aware of on the planet. So very few people are like, yes, I want to do that, especially for their first medicine, like in, the sacred medicine circles.
Sure.
Very few people are like, yes, for their first time. So he was just ready and he processed a lot of family stuff. And then I'm sure he had to work through a lot of that this year to get to the point of being okay with moving on from this life.
His work was complete.
Yeah. So to me, it was really beautiful to be part of that.
Do you know how he passed? Natural cause? We don't have to go into it.
We'll say natural, but
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to cut that out.
All right.
All right. Well, let's talk about some of the other things in your birth chart that you've got going on. When I look at the personal life placement, so in the birth chart, there's the midheaven, which is career, your public image, but the personal life placement is opposite of that point. So in your birth chart, it's an Aquarius.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned your father was February 5th.
Yeah.
So when we think about that kind of Aquarius energy in the personal life, Aquarius is one of the coldest signs of the zodiac.
That makes sense.
So with this being your personal life placement, well, there's a couple ways that this could go in a person's birth chart. Feeling very isolated, especially in your home environment, especially as a child.
Yeah.
Maybe from parents, which, it sounds like there's some accuracy there.
Yeah, for sure.
It can sometimes be getting lost in such a big group. Sometimes people have this when there's like either nobody in their family or they've got such a big family that like they're not seen. But either way, there's something about neglect or this feeling of being left out. But what this will do for people is make them very conscientious of other people.
Right.
It's like a weird thing. It dissolves the ego.
Yeah.
Our other fixed sign, Aquarius. Leo's expanding the ego. Aquarius is dissolving it.
Right.
So can you speak on this a little bit for me?
Yeah, that's my whole childhood.
Okay.
I feel was, I did have a big family and felt like I had no voice, really. Yeah. Especially, I was the oldest of 4, so I was the caretaker. I was kind of the dad of the family in a weird sense, like I was the caretaker and made the food and all that stuff. So yeah, it was very interesting. And then it was still very controlled, very disciplinary in my family style, just the whole family, aunts, uncles, all that. So, so yeah, that's interesting that's in my chart.
It's there. I mean, growing up with a personal life placement in Aquarius means coldness you're no stranger to.
Yeah. And I do feel like that has been really incredible for like presence, because some people have a hard time truly being present.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, now in our digital age, that's a whole different thing. But even if it's just no phones or whatnot, still some people have a hard time with that container, really connecting in the eyes or really taking things in. And so that's something that I guess I kind of just naturally adopted from that space.
Yeah. Like the ability of being able to handle the non-attachment.
The non-attachment, yeah.
Yeah,
like, but also the aspect of really receiving what the other's sending.
Yeah, but to receive, sometimes you also have to be non-attached.
For sure, yeah.
To like, if someone's putting energy in your way, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral, you have to be non-attached and get over yourself enough to be able to look back or receive it. I'm still working on it myself.
Well, yeah, that's like a constant work in progress, right?
Yeah. So, it's something that takes practice and time.
Yeah.
But as we kind of go a little bit further into, so we've got the IC in Aquarius, the personal life placement, whereas the midheaven's in Leo. So we know you got Saturn in Leo as well. So Saturn and the midheaven being in the same sign, Saturn creates time. It takes a long time to figure something out about yourself. It takes a long time for you to figure out what you were going to do professionally. Mm-hmm. The real work happens in the second half of your life.
Yeah.
So we also see Saturn making a hard aspect to that sun planet in Taurus, Saturn in Leo, sun in Taurus. So withholding the self-esteem was one interpretation. The other one would be growing up quickly. Saturn makes things old or puts time on them. The ego is the ego.
Yeah.
So having to grow up quickly from a young age.
Yeah.
So it's in the birth chart. You said that, but I can understand why that's in there.
Right.
But then we've got the moon in Leo. So internally, you have this energy of wanting to be a performer or wanting to be the center of attention, wanting to Leo, expand the ego, especially when it comes to your work. You want to be seen in your work.
Yes. Now differently than I did when I moved here.
Yeah. Well, being a model versus a medicine person.
I moved to LA to be an actor, right? So I definitely wanted that.
Okay.
I wanted the spotlight, and then that was part of what I had to work through was, wait, why do I want the spotlight?
Yeah.
Do I really need the external validation, acceptance? Sure. Do I really need that? Is that healthy? So it was all these different layers of getting to the final point where I realized, wait, I think me following acting was ultimately for me to find myself and be at peace with who I am authentically.
Yeah.
Rather than to actually be a working actor.
Yeah. Well, the moon is our unconscious response in life. So there's a part of you that just wants to perform and wants to be seen.
Right.
And then the moon also is what emotionally fulfills us. So by doing it or by being in front of people, it will bring you emotional satisfaction. Mm-hmm. And then also having the career placement on the moon, working your work. So you have it that your work is heavily involved now with healing people. So it brings healing to that ego in a different way because it's the moon in Leo, emotionally healing the ego by your career. But then also emotionally healing other people by your career. So like, do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So all of these pieces are there and they're playing out. Like the birth chart really gives your personality quite strongly. And so let's see. We also have Jupiter in Gemini. So Gemini is the sign of divorces, splits, breaks. Jupiter is where we're the most expanded. So expanded that this is where our demons may be able to be found. So breakups might be something that you know quite well, or like having to come undone or leave things behind, or you know, the significant breaks and splits in life.
Yeah.
Talk about how you're expanded about these kinds of things, but also maybe where the wound could show up here. And Jupiter in Gemini is also a good speaker, good communicator. Those are some of the positive qualities, but I'm curious.
Well, yeah, even from childhood, I've experienced those, through my significant family members, the ones that helped raise me. There were definitely several important splits. Of course, the one with my dad, that was before I could even formulate thoughts or anything along those lines. But apparently he was kind of around the first year. So interesting how that was one of my formative energetic imprints.
Yeah.
And then how my first real relationship when I was 18 was very dramatic. And I kept having these like breakups.
And getting back together and breaking up.
And so interestingly, I've had these patterns of breakups and then getting back together. Even though like I got married a second time. I've been married twice.
I was going to say, when Jupiter's in the 7th house, usually someone is married more than once.
Yeah. So the second time was interesting because we had dated like when I was 15, and then we stopped. Then a year later.
Yeah.
And then we finally like really hit it off when I was like 22, and then ended up getting married. So
interesting.
All these interesting breaks. With that, it wasn't so much my choice, but still it's interesting how it happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very interesting. Well, and we've got this little asteroid Lilith on top of Jupiter. So Lilith is our divine sexual liberation. So there's kind of like something about these touch and go, break up, get back together, break up, get back together, that even on a physical level, it like makes the forbidden fruit so much sweeter or something.
Right.
There's like an addictive quality on some level. So that's something to have moved through in this lifetime.
Wow.
This is part of your lessons in this life, because the 7th house is the Libra area of life, and Libra is one of your destiny signs. So learning to deal with the splits, divorces, breakups, in order to learn how to relate to other people so that you can heal and then not repeat the same mistakes.
Right.
So that's a major part of the karma in this lifetime, which it sounds like you're doing a great job with.
Yeah, I hope so.
So there's 2 more important planetary bodies, I guess 3, that we haven't touched upon. But I definitely want to talk about this one. You've got Neptune in Sagittarius.
Okay.
So it's at 15 degrees. My destiny sign is 18 degrees Sagittarius. So Neptune is spirituality. It's the Pisces planet. It has to do with religion, spirituality, shamanism, healing, magic, entertainment, art, music, beauty, all of those kinds of things. So when Neptune's in Sagittarius, oftentimes these people are seekers of spirituality from many different cultures. There's a shape-shifting quality to your spirituality.
Yeah.
So for me, my birth chart destiny is Sagittarius, to learn from other people about the world. So you can actually teach me a lot about spirituality. I have a lot to learn from you because your spiritual planet's right on my destiny.
Oh, wow.
So you would be a good guide or teacher to me.
Wow.
Based on this birth chart. So that's another contact that we have. Your Neptune on my north node, and then my career placement on your ascendant. So we've got a little bit of astrology karma.
Very cool.
Yeah, kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
But you've got Neptune right in the first house. So what this can do to a person is make them a little bit dreamy on the first impression. So you've got the Scorpio side, but then also people are projecting a lot onto you. So people might see one thing, and then, it's kind of like a Marilyn Monroe placement when Neptune's in the first house. There's something a little glitzy that like people see one thing and they're actually missing what you actually are.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So, and then in your birth chart, you have what's known as a grand trine, meaning
I've heard that.
You've got Neptune in Sagittarius, fire sign, Saturn in Leo, fire sign, Venus in Aries, fire sign. You've got planets in all of the fire signs. So you're a very fiery being, although you're a Taurus.
Yeah.
But there's something fiery, passionate, intense, powerful, leadership kind of energy.
Yeah.
And then Venus is opposing Pluto in your birth chart. So all of these fire planets are supporting this really core wound in your lifetime of not having an obsession when it comes to love. Being able to find balanced and healthy love, because the karma that you were born into was with an anxious attachment style. So you're here. That's the Libra lesson. Venus is ruled by Libra. On your birth chart, Venus is opposing the planet of addiction, intensity, etc. So you're here to balance your relationships.
Right.
Does that make sense to you?
Totally. Yeah.
Anything you want to say about that?
Well, the fire has definitely been an experience. Yeah. And part of my tattoo, I got that on the fire. So
very nice.
Yeah, I've always, I grew up in Florida where it's quite hot all the time. So I was just always hot and fast metabolism. So even internally, I've just got that fire kind of brewing. So
yeah, it's just kind of a part of the karma that you come in with.
Yeah.
So you've got the passion, you've got the intensity, but now it's like, okay, how do I, instead of being so extreme and chase what I want, how do I balance myself so that I can be more fully integrated and balanced with others?
Mm-hmm.
That's like another epitomal part of your destiny.
Yeah.
And like not see what I want to see and see what's actually there.
Yeah. Or let be whatever is.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then the last planet that we haven't really talked about yet is Uranus. So this is the planet of chaos, unpredictability, non-attachment, and it's opposing the sun in the birth chart. So the ego planet.
Oh, that makes sense.
We've talked a lot about that already. But Uranus is also making a square to Saturn, which was also touching the ego. So all of the stuff with the father is just heavily amplified there. But Uranus is in Scorpio. So the sign of intensity, transformation, death, and change. Wow. And Uranus shows where we can be humanitarian or of service. So being that, like we said, that grim reaper kind of archetype to help people in a major way.
Yeah.
To help them shift or change. And it's in the 12th house. So going into environments such as temples, churches, jail cells, convents, the hidden areas of life. Being a medicine man, I think kind of fulfills that.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I do have a draw to those places.
Yeah.
To just feel the energies.
Because there's an intensity in those places.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah, yeah.
So
that's totally it.
There's a calling for you to actually maybe heal some people in some of those more hidden areas of life in the shadows.
Yeah, yeah.
But Shaun, this is just about everything in your birth chart. I'm curious, what did you think?
It's really fascinating to me how specific this can be. Because I've never heard anyone go through, especially more on the tropical side, how all these facets are here.
Yeah.
So interesting to hear all the parallels and how it really is just a reflection of what I'm experiencing and even moving towards.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting how it's essentially like a roadmap.
It's a blueprint.
Yeah.
And my goal is to, start my own church of ayahuasca, and people have their birth charts done before they come to sit.
Wow.
So that we can get to the root.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's been such a pleasure to get to sit and chat with you, my friend. I want to say
awesome.
Thank you for being on the podcast. If you want to plug yourself, please feel free to do so.
Sure. Yeah. My website is divineguidance.me. So that's where you can kind of find more out about me and my offerings.
Amazing. And your name?
Shaun Ryan.
Shaun Ryan at divineguidance.me.
Yes.
You can find his offerings there. And as always, my name is Danny Santos. You can find me at Santos Crystal Visions on Instagram or Astro Daddy Podcast on Instagram. Beware of scam accounts pretending to be me and messaging you, asking you for your money. And because it's never going to be me doing that. Always confirm my identity by asking me to state my name, your name, and the date in a voice note. And to close the show out, I got to say my little mantra. Thank you guys so much for being here. And remember, I love you. I see you. And baby, I am you. And I believe in you too. And that's Astro Daddy.
I love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.